If you have a club show coming up and you're nervous about making the jump from your controller to club equipment, and you want to be prepared for absolutely every eventuality, in this video, I'm going to give you 5 quick steps to troubleshoot the gear, plus a mini checklist of little settings that most people overlook. So if anything does go wrong, you'll be able to handle it like a seasoned professional. Okay, when you turn up to play in a club, they're most likely going to have Pioneer CDJs and a Pioneer DJ mixer, and they're probably going to expect you to use their equipment as opposed to turning up with a controller and trying to fit it in, and can get kind of messy. So no doubt though, the easiest way to load your music onto the CDJs is using a USB stick. Now, here's the thing, I have done a video about which USBs to use, I'll link that in now, but personally I use the SanDisk Ultra 3.0, and I find 16 gigabyte is more than enough space. But here's the thing, a lot of people think, oh wow, okay, CDJs read USB, so what they do is they just load their music directly onto the USB. But then when they turn up to play, they can't see their playlists, they can't see the waveforms, they can't see the BPMs, and there's literally, it's like, you know, DJing without any visuals whatsoever, and that makes DJing a lot more difficult. So to get all the metadata onto the USB stick, you have to first prepare your music through Rekordbox. Now, the free version of Rekordbox is okay, so if you're not usually a Rekordbox user, just download Rekordbox, drag your music into the software, much like you would using any other software. See, that's the thing, right? The beauty of DJing is that all DJ software and DJ gear basically does the same thing, same layout, same everything. So here's the thing, if you're not sure though how to use Rekordbox, basically, I'll link in my Rekordbox walkthrough video now, but it's pretty simple. But in short, you drag your music into Rekordbox, you make playlists, you may even set cue points to map out the best parts of each track, showing that everything lines up. And then you simply export your playlist to the USB, and you just basically wait for it to finish loading the tracks before taking the USB out and then just turning up to play. It's that simple. But if it was me turning up to play in a club, I would always take a duplicate, like a second USB with the same stuff on there, just in case, right, that the link cable, which we'll talk about in a second, doesn't work, and the link cable connects to players, and if that's not there, you're going to want to have 1 USB per player, just as a backup. I've always taken 2 USB sticks to every show, but I've seldom needed the second. Like, they've most commonly got a link cable, but trust me, if they don't, and you've only got 1 USB stick, well, you can't play because you're only going to be able to load songs onto one side. So that would kind of suck. Anyway, the advantage of having a USB is it's easy to actually do changeovers between DJs. So let's say I'm coming on after a DJ, this is their last song. I go into the spare deck, basically put my USB into the player, select USB, and I can use the rotary selector here in the same way that you'd use a rotary selector on your controller, but the only difference is that when you're using a rotary selector to load music on your controller, it's actually moving it on your computer screen, as when I'm using CDJs, you've actually got the screen per player. So that means I can go into here to playlist, find the songs that I want to play, for instance, just load the song, but then when I load the song, it's really only loading the song for this player, and it kind of like separates them. See, with a computer, you got both songs on the same screen, you can stack waveforms, but on CDJs, the big difference is you just got 1 song per player, and you're going to have the track information needed for that player. So over here I can see the name of the song, the waveform, the BPM, that kind of thing, but you might not be able to stack waveforms. On some of the newer stuff, you can still stack waveforms they've got that, but on here, you're probably going to want to know how to beat match. Anyway, just a quick note, right? I don't suggest taking in your computer. See, not only can there be a little bit of a stigma against laptop DJs, especially in the club scene where the majority of people are using USB sticks, but if compared to just plugging in a USB to load your music versus connecting your computer to the club gear, basically that means it's going to mean more cabling, it's going to mean like having compatible firmware requirements. Honestly, the USB is so much easier and way more fail-safe than using a computer. And by using a USB stick, you decrease your chances of encountering like technical issues that often come when people try to connect their computer to club gear. So honestly, jump on the USB train. It's easy, right? And if you ask me, if you're using a computer, it just creates a barrier between you and your audience. With a USB, you just turn up, plug it in, it's easy. And if you're easy to work with, people want to work with you. Now, as soon as you load your USB onto the player, you quickly want to check that you have signal. So what you do is you load your track, and with the volume down, so the other DJ is probably still playing. So you've loaded your track, you've got your song ready, and then with the volume down, hit play, and just make sure that you've got signal on the mixer. Now, if you don't have signal there, okay, let's say you hit play and you're like, oh my God, there's no signal. What you do is at the back here, you've got the RCA cable that connects the mixer to the CDJ, and what you do is you just make sure that that's running from the white and the white to the red, you know, into the back here, and just make sure it's going into a line input or a CD/line input. Now, which channel it's plugged into, to be honest, that can differ. You probably, when you turn up to a club, you probably want to use whatever channels they've got it plugged into already. But my philosophy on which channels, like if I was plugging it in personally, is say on the here I've got a 4-channel mixer, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and let's say I'm using 4 decks. It would be channel 1, 2, 3, and 4. So I personally think it makes sense to have these in channels 2 and 3. But then again, sometimes people might have this one in channel 1 because that's closest to there, and that in channel 4. I've seen that in clubs. And sometimes actually some channels might actually be damaged, like maybe someone spilled a drink and channel 3 is not working and they've got you in 2 and 4. All the channels do the same thing. So you just got to kind of, when you first turn up, figure out what channel you're in. And what you do to do that is you get your song ready, the other DJ's playing, you've loaded your USB with the volume down for the other one that's not playing, just hit play, see where the signal comes up. If the signal's not coming up, then you just got to check the back, see where the RCA is plugged into, and then make sure the input selector at the top here actually matches the input at the back. So that's in CD and line. See, that's facing line, but we're in that one. So I switch that to there, and there's the signal. And I'll be honest, man, like that's actually not that difficult. But I actually, what I'm about to say, I don't think happens a lot, but let's say there's a DJ on the lineup that's threatened by you and they want to sabotage you. They could easily just go before you come on and just switch that off, you know what I mean? And it will actually separate the able from the average on that, because people go in there be like, oh, what? And then they're there and they just can't, and they're like, what's going on? I've got no sound, and they just don't know how to fix it. So when you first turn up, quickly, okay, just load your USB with the volume down on the ones not being used by the DJ before you, hit play, see where the signal is. If there's no signal, you know, again, just make sure the input selector matches the input at the back, and that's connecting those two, okay? I know I repeated it a couple of times there, but honestly, repetition is the mother of all skills, and I just want to really drill that in. So, okay, once I've got that actually there, then I just, I'll do a quick checklist at the end, but I'll just quickly make sure that your trim's there. That's kind of good. You don't want that in the reds. If that's in the reds, I'd trim the signal, pull that back to just below the reds. I'd make sure my EQ is probably just all straight up until I do my first transition. Make sure sometimes this might actually be on, like the filter might be on, and you'll bring up the volume and you're like, why is there no sound? And then you just make sure, it could be like, you see what I mean? You're like, why is that not there? You know what I mean? So just make sure, I would be turning the filter. Cool. And then another thing is also a couple of things to check. This the crossfader as well. Sometimes if you're not used to using the crossfader, see, crossfader is really good if you're scratching, you know, and for doing effects. But if you're just doing transitions, which is fine, which is great, well, it's probably what the crowd want to hear, like what songs you play and how you arrange those songs. But I actually feel that you get, for transitions, a lot more control with your volume faders than you do with your crossfader, which is more for scratching. So if I wasn't scratching, I might actually turn my crossfader off by putting the crossfader assign header through. And you'll see what that does is, it's not working, it doesn't do anything, you know what I mean? But here's the thing, if that's on, if the DJ before is using it, that might be on channel A here, this is deck B, and then what happens is you turn up, and the other guy is playing now, you turn up to play, you're like, wow, I've got signal, but you bring up the volume and then you're like, oh my God, where's the sound? And people get stuck on that too. So again, the troubleshooting thing, if you turn up and you're like, wow, there's no sound, just check your crossfader. Cool. And if you want to just accidentally, like just say you're worried about bumping it, just deactivate the crossfader by putting that to through. That is if you're not using it to scratch. Okay, now, if you turn up then as well and you hit play, you've got signal, you bring up the volume, you see your crossfader's okay, but you still got no sound. Again, just make sure the master volume's up here too, so you can turn that up. And if you still got no sound, well, again, like I said, check the filters off, make sure that's straight up. And I'd probably also make sure this effect, that button's not flashing either, just because you don't want to apply effects to it already. Like you want to go in, make sure that's not flashing, the color effect's straight up, you know, that you've got signal, the crossfader's there in the middle, you've got volume there. And if you've still got no sound and you've got signal, then it could be the speakers. Just make sure your speakers are connected. And then you might not have access to the speakers in the club. So realistically, you might have to go seek the venue. I don't think it's going to come to that. To be honest, I just think you'll turn up. There'll be a DJ before you. They're always there to help you. So to be honest, you'll just turn up. You'll put your USB in, you'll check. 9 times out of 10, you'll have signal. You can just make sure everything's sort of set the way you like it, you know. And then when you're ready, you go in to do your transition. Now, next video, I can talk about actually preparing for your club show and how to come on after the DJ before you. And let's say you're used to using cue points and they don't have cue points, and just how to make the most of your first show. So let me know in the comments below if you want a video. I think I'll do one actually on how to actually make the most of your club show, as this is more about how to actually optimize the club gear to make sure that you turn up and you're not going to be throwing a curveball. Okay, so some of the older club gear doesn't show hot cues, but all CDJs, no matter how old, they show memory cue points. Now, my advice when using CDJs in clubs is to use memory cues to map your in and out points, and hot cues to jump around the track real time to create remixes, mashups, and basically effects on the fly. However, if you turn up and the gear doesn't have hot cues, then you may just have to abandon your hot cue effects, but at least you still have your memory cue points. That means then you're always marking out the best places to do your transitions, which can take a lot of pressure off when playing live. And the chances are the crowd won't care or notice whether or not you're using hot cues, as they're really mostly interested in, you know, the tracks you play and how you arrange those tracks to create atmosphere. So my advice when preparing to play in clubs is use memory cues. And if you do want a video on how and where to set cue points, please check out my free mini course, as the link's in the description below. And that's a really great resource to help you build momentum quickly. Most gear in clubs these days has sync, but to sync, you're going to have to make sure the CDJs are connected by a link cable, okay? And what the link cable does is it allows you to link the CDJs together, and that means load music from one USB onto both players. So I hit link there and I link to that USB over here. And then what it does is it then allows you to sync. So I can hit sync on both and you can actually sync. However, if the venue does not have a link cable, what it means is you're going to need one USB per player, and that means no sync. Now, trust me, if you're going to want to play in clubs, man, you want to know how to beat match. And quite often, right, in my beat matching videos, I get comments from people saying stuff like, the easiest way to beat match is to hit sync, okay? But it's these people that are going to one day get a very rude awakening, as trust me, if there's no option to sync, and I've seen this before, right? And that means people turn up, they're obviously using sync, they've probably got great track selection, but if they can't beat match and the beats are all over the place, honestly, they're not going to be taken seriously, and the promoter might actually kick them off. It's like, you don't know how to beat match. I'm not talking about the beats being a little bit out. I was hearing it was just like, it was so messy. I could not wait for this DJ to get off. It really was that bad. So honestly, knowing how to sync's a must. Even if you turn up, like I said, you could turn up, they might not have the link cable. Or another thing that could happen is that you've got a link cable, but the connections at the back here, they get loose sometimes. And I've known this has happened before to me, and I've seen it happen to other people as well. And it's interesting to see how they deal with this kind of pressure. But what happens is sometimes the kind of port at the back here that the link cable goes into, it gets loose. and all of a sudden the link cable could drop out. And if the link cable drops out, it means on the one that it drops out on, right, it's going to go into an emergency loop, and it's going to loop 8 beats. And that means then you're in that time, you're like, oh my God. And what it's going to require is you're going to have to go into the other track that's still going, which isn't the linked one. So the linked one's going to be the one that drops out, and you're going to have to quickly mix in, get the other one out. But what it means then is, if it was dropping out the cable, that's when you're gonna have to bring in your second USB. You know what I mean? And that means you can only sync when you've got link. Otherwise you got one USB per player, and both players are actually operating independently, which means no sync, no visual. You still load the songs fine. All it really means is you just need to know how to beat match. Okay, some of this I've already covered, okay, and no doubt the previous points are the main ones to consider when troubleshooting a club system, but now I'll just quickly run through some of the smaller, sillier, kind of like kick yourself settings that everyone really must know. So number one, make sure the master tempo button is on for both players, and that means you can change the BPM of the track without actually affecting the key, which means it's unnoticeable when you move the BPM. It's pretty cool. Number two, make sure auto cue is on. This will ensure your new song cues at the beginning and doesn't just start playing immediately. Also, make sure quantize is on. So when you use loops, it's going to snap perfectly, like snap the loop perfectly to the beat grid. Then have the tempo pitch range. So the tempo pitch range affects the sensitivity of the tempo fader. So here's the thing, if you've got it on wide, okay, that means when you actually move the tempo fader, you've got no sensitivity really, and using wide is really, really good for pitch effects, and it's really good for doing big BPM jumps. But if you're trying to actually match BPMs, it's not perfect for that. It's more for using it for effects. So what I'd do is I'd probably put the tempo range onto ±6 or ±10, and that means then it's going to be a lot easier for you to match the BPMs of both tracks. Then you've got the jog mode. So you've got vinyl mode, or you take that off and it's CDJ mode. And what it means is in vinyl mode, if you're playing, you can actually, if you touch the top of the platter, it's going to stop, much like vinyl. And what they do is like vinyl, you go to the first beat, you're like 1, 2, 3, 4, and you let go. But if you touch it there, then it's going to stop. So just be mindful of that. So vinyl's great if you're actually doing spin backs, or there's like different effects, or you know, like I said, you're using it like vinyl to mix in. Maybe the play button's busted and you just sort of, you got to like, that's the old way. It's like bang, you let go, beat match, and then you use the sides to beat match. But to be honest, let's say you're nervous about, you know, playing and you're using this just to beat match, you could take vinyl mode off, and then honestly to beat match you can use the sides or the top. It doesn't matter, and it means if you're playing you don't actually touch the top. You know, if you touch the top accidentally, it's going to stop. So it could, if you're not doing spin backs and, you know, vinyl release tricks and stuff like that, you could actually take vinyl mode off, and honestly you just use that to actually beat match. Now, unless you're using the crossfader to scratch, I would personally make sure the crossfader assigns are switched to through for the channels that you're using. So basically what it does is it's just going to, by having that on through, it deactivates the crossfader just in case you bump it while you're playing. Also, make sure the effects are turned off before you start. So both on the beat effects rack, you don't want that flashing, so just turn that off, and actually just make sure that your color effects here, they're just straight up like we mentioned earlier. All in all, playing at clubs and events is the best feeling in the world, and in truth, these days we're all spoiled as we can simply rock up with USBs in our pockets, headphones around our neck, and honestly, away we go. Now, once you have a few shows under your belt and you have some experience, you're going to build confidence very quickly, and I assure you, man, you're going to be hooked. Anyway, this leads perfectly though onto how to actually prepare for the club show and make the most of your club show to assure repeat opportunities. So if you do want a video on navigating the politics of club shows and how to make the most of your set time to make sure that you leave an unforgettable impact on your audience, then please let me know in the comments below, as I have some fresh insights on this and that you know, I know would be a huge benefit of you. A lot of people overlook this stuff. Anyway, please like, comment, and subscribe to help the channel thrive. I'll see you next week. Thanks.